Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I have an amazing guest with me today. And a shout out to Marcy Rader for helping us connect. And shout out to National Speakers Association for connecting me to Marcy. And welcome also my newest member of the NSA family, or my guest just said she signed up. So those of you who aren't familiar, National Speakers Association, incredible resource. Check it out at nsaspeaker.org. Now, with any further delay, let me introduce this week's guest. I'm pleased to interview one of our BizBook Pub Hub partners. Our hub partners are experts who support entrepreneurs along their author journey. Today's guest is a ghostwriter and content strategist who's made it her mission to help bold thinkers turn their big ideas into books that actually move the needle. Known for her truth-telling style and sharp strategic brain, she works with experts who are ready to own their voice, take a seat at the table, and build a platform that drives their business, not just their book sales. She doesn't believe in writing a book just to say you did it. She believes in developing thought leadership that creates real traction, the kind that builds credibility, lands speaking gigs, and fills pipelines. Through her company, The Pocket PhD, she helps big idea experts test, refine, and amplify their message long before the manuscript gets started, so that when the book comes, it's not just smart, it's unstoppable. She's the author of Unwritten, The Thought Leader's Guide to Not Overthinking Your Business Book, the go-to guide for business owners who want to stop overthinking and finally complete their book without pausing everything else in their business. Please join me welcoming Emily Crookston. Welcome, Emily, to the show. It is a thrill to have you here. And I'm really so pleased that Marcy Rader helped us connect. I feel like you've just been popping up left and right in my world lately. And thank you for being a member of the Hub. We'll definitely be sharing more information about how people can check out bizbookpubhub.com. But I brought you on here because I want to know more about the backstory. We were joking before we went live that people don't wake up when they're children and think, I want to be a ghostwriter one day. So what is the origin story, Emily, for how you ended up working with authors?
Yeah. Hey, Robbie. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I love all the things that you do, and I'm so glad to know you. Yeah, the backstory to being a ghostwriter, it's so true. Nobody thinks that this is a job when they're, doing their career fairs in college and things like that. But yeah, I used to be a philosophy professor, so I was an academic, and when I was ready to leave academia because, well, it's a toxic environment and I was tired of it, I said, what did I want to do before I wanted to be a philosophy professor? And the answer was, well, I thought marketing was cool when I was 13. And so a friend of a friend happened to be looking for marketing help, and she has a web development company, a small boutique company, and she needed blog posts. This was back in 2015, where blogging for your business was the biggest thing you could do. Social media wasn't as big as, writing articles and posting them on your own website. So I started out ghost blogging. I started writing blogs for her. She had web clients and marketing clients who needed blogs as well. And at some point, she said to me, you could start a business doing this. And so that's what I did. And then I said, well, writing blog posts is not the best job in the world. I probably have to write like 10 blogs a week to really make a living doing this. And so I said, I can write longer things. And I found my way to my first book ghostwriting clients because, I have the academic background, I have a research background. I'm not intimidated by big ideas and new ideas. And now I get to get into the sausage with my clients and learn about something new. And I try to do a book in 16 weeks. So it's a short engagement, relatively short engagement, 4 months we work together. I get to learn about your topic enough to write a whole book about it. And it's really amazing and fun. And I have this skill of hearing people's voices. I actually hear the voice of my clients in my head when I'm writing. It's a little bit like method acting. So I really love it. I'm a, I could have been an actor. I think I could have been on stage. I never was, maybe someday. But this is my kind of outlet for that kind of creativity, and I really enjoy
I had no idea that you were a philosophy professor. That's, of course, where I'm going to start.
it. Yes.
Um, I actually took quite a few philosophy classes in my
Yeah.
day.
Awesome.
Yeah. I have like a political science and
Yeah.
sociology, but
Nice.
socio-political something or other as a minor. I
Can't
can't
even remember
remember.
the jargon
I
anymore.
can't
Yeah.
remember the jargon, but yeah, I took quite a few philosophy classes in
Cool.
college, and
Yeah.
you kind of forget about how that all is in your brain and how it influences you, even if you're
Yeah.
not bringing it up all the time.
That's
So,
right.
okay, so you're not daunted by writing because clearly to get to that level, you had written large amounts
Right.
of work in an
That's
academic
right.
setting. It's still really different to write in a you know I don't want to say popular culture, but a more accessible, less
Yeah.
jargony, less academic writing. And it's
Mhm.
interesting that you came through blog posts, which of course had their heyday more than a decade ago. But I want to hear about that first client you signed as a ghostwriter. Like, how did
Mm,
you know? I mean, you just
yeah.
said you knew you could do it and you weren't daunted, but there's still a difference between like, yeah,
Yeah.
I've been ghostwriting these blog posts now for a while, and like, I know I could write your book. Let's
Yeah.
do this. Like, how
Yeah.
did you decide that was a yes, and how did they know that it was a yes? Like, how did
Mm.
you market that?
Yes, it's a great question. It's a great question. So I think often as starting out as a ghostwriter, you kind of say, "Oh, I think I can do this," and you charge a low fee because you're not sure. You're like, "Hey, look, it's kind of an experiment. I've never done it before. I'm pretty sure I can do it. Here's all the other stuff I've written. Let's see if we can work together." So that's kind of how it went. I had a client who was a professional dancer. This is when I was still living in Myrtle Beach. That's where I was. I last had a teaching position, and she basically had a diary that she had written and she wanted to turn it into a memoir. I don't generally write memoirs. I love reading memoirs. But as a first shot, I thought, why not? I didn't, I, that, at the beginning, I didn't have a refined idea of the types of books that I really wanted to write. But she came with a project and said, gave me a chance, fortunately, to do it. And yeah, I basically took her diary and turned it into a memoir, and it worked really well, actually. She had a lot of content. Most of my clients now who come to me have no content. They may have an idea. They may even want to work out their idea with me. And generally, they might have an outline. They might not. So it's a very different project than that first project. So it was a nice kind of. I felt like I had training wheels on because she gave me a lot of content to work with, as a start. So that
Yeah,
made the
make
project go a little smoother. Yeah.
I'm picturing like kid birthday parties at a bowling alley.
That's
The
right.
bumpers were up, you know,
Exactly.
and the fact you had so much
Mm,
content in her voice, literally her
yes.
voice,
Yes.
written
Right.
to herself, not in a public, not planning, and now
Yes.
you're trying to make it into a narrative. It's more
Yeah.
shaping than writing, and that's a great way in.
Yes.
It feels rare to have that kind of entry point into this
Yeah,
part.
I think it is. In my few, experience since then, it has been different. The real sort of first business book that I wrote, she also came to me. She had an incredible amount of trust that often happens with clients. Like we connect kind of immediately. The client I'm working with right now, we just kind of clicked right off the bat, and that really helps. And I know that that's not really helpful. It's not helpful for me as a for my marketing and things like that. Like, oh, I'm just looking for clients I click with. Like that's not good marketing language. But it is really true. When you're, writing a book with someone is a very personal experience. There have been moments where there's trauma coming through. There's it's almost like therapy for a lot of people. And even though I'm writing business books, right, these are not, for the most part, memoirs. That was a really rare experience for me, to that first experience. But there's still the stories come up and the tears start falling sometimes, and because people are really dealing with these big, you know light bulb moments, or these big ideas that they've been sort of playing with for a long time. It's not usually like, oh, here's my big idea, let's write a book about it. It's been years of this coming together. And so yeah, sometimes there is that moment of being a therapist and being like, okay, we got to make this for public consumption. This is no longer your diary. This is no longer you and me just talking, right? This is going to go out to thousands of people. So yeah, it's fascinating.
I'm I'm thinking that the kind of people who hire a ghostwriter are further along in developing an idea. I actually want to turn this to a question. This is my assumption, and I want you to push back. So I'm thinking that they might be further along in developing an idea or having a body of work than someone who is self-publishing with a shoestring budget and just trying to get their foot in the door initially, right? So hopefully they have more content out there in some format, videos, presentations, TEDx talk, podcast interviews, where you can glean some of like who they are and how they show up in the world. But that doesn't mean they have a book.
Right.
So is my assumption that they come with a body of work. I don't think people. I feel like buying the services of a ghostwriter is like a bigger deal than I'm going to sit down at my Word document and just type.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great question. And, in an ideal world, yeah, they would have tons of content for me to pull from, or at least so I can understand their voice and get to know them a little bit better. But you'd be surprised at how many people are like, well, I don't know, I haven't written any content, but I'm going to write a book. I'm going to just put it all in a book. I don't need to put it out on social media. I don't need to create videos. I don't need to do talks. I'm just going to write a book. I always try to dissuade them about that. Like my first question I always ask is, what's the business case for your book? Like, how is this book fitting into your business strategy? That's the number one question. And I have often talked people out of writing their books because they realize, oh, I don't have a good answer to that question. Or they realize, oh, I've only been in business like 2 years. Why am I writing a book now? Like these kinds of things come up. Or, oh, I haven't really worked out this idea well enough yet. And yeah, there's a lot that happens in the writing process. I always tell people, it's amazing how much thought happens when you put fingers to keyboard. And the amazing thing is that can also work with a ghostwriter. A lot of thought happens in the conversations that we have. I'm basically interviewing my clients and talking about pieces of their book, and then I do the discipline of writing. But in that process, a lot of ideas come and show up on the page that you didn't anticipate. You didn't have. So you don't have to have a fully worked out perfect outline to work with a ghostwriter. A ghostwriter can definitely help you formulate your idea. But it does help if you're a kind of regular content creator. If you're at least used to sort of thinking about your own thoughts and expressing them to other people, that it's a huge help. It makes the process go a lot smoother.
Well, a couple of things came up for me as I was hearing your answer. I was thinking about how I've also talked people out of writing a book and publishing a podcast, like launching a podcast, because they don't have a business case.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important question, and it's a core piece of why I ended up creating BizBook Pub Hub, which is how you and I know each other because you're one of our hub partners. I think too often, particularly first-time authors, like rushing to get a book out because they're told they should have a book, but not really understanding how this specific book helps the business they currently have or the business they want to have. And what's that dotted line or even not dotted line? What's the actual like pipeline from the book to the business? So I love when the hub partners, I think universally the thing that brings us together is that we're working with entrepreneurs who are writing a book that we hope to turn into a business asset. And I say we because you and I are both in that. We're not just the CEOs of this kind of work, but we're also clients of this kind of work. We're also writing these books hoping that the work will flow our way. So I love that you're asking those questions and giving people a chance to try to figure that out. It's probably more important they have that figured out than they actually have their complete concept for the book. I'd rather them like noodle on what's it called, the framework, or what are the 5 steps going to actually be, and is it really only 4 steps or 6 steps? Like I think that's the stuff that can happen throughout the process of a book. But if you can't answer that simple question, I've actually gotten clients because I asked a strategic question like that, and they were like, oh, I hired this publisher and they've been helping me write this book, but I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, right. That's a scary moment, but yes, I know. I've had those experiences where they're like, "Well, my friend wrote a book and I want to be an author," and I'm like, "It's not good enough." Like, you could okay, if you want to be an author that badly, go write a PDF of an ebook, have an ebook and put it on your website. Like, do you need to spend maybe $100,000, self-publishing a book and working with me, to get it out there? It's a big investment. You need to know how you're going to get that money back.
Right.
The worst thing for me is having authors that I've worked with, and then we write the book and it never comes out, and I'm always just like blown away. Like,
I mean, they
did you
don't publish it?
that time? Yeah, that time and that energy. I've had them, like my very first client, she finally published her book just this last year. But we worked together in like 2017. So, there's this, and all of it is because she hadn't thought through how she would market the book, how she was going to, use it to support her business. She just didn't have those steps in place. And so it just sits there.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately kind of common. It can happen if
This
you don't
reminds
do
me,
those later steps.
this feels adjacent to the conversation, but Pat Flynn, who's the host of Smart Passive Income, early
Mhm.
on, that podcast was such a huge influence on me when I was getting my
Mm,
business kind of off the ground. And I remember he said the number one um, problem people have with their business is they didn't build an email list soon enough. And the number two problem is they don't send email to their email list.
right.
And here it's like, the number one problem is you didn't write a good enough book. Right? It's
Right.
not it's not a quality book. The number two problem is that no one knows you wrote a book.
Right. You haven't told anyone. Right. Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
seriously, like,
Yeah.
and to put
Yeah.
all that money, time, and effort into
Yeah.
creating a piece of
Yeah.
content, it's
Mm.
it's so much more than a blog post, right? Like it's
Yeah.
meant to have longevity.
Right.
You're also an author who participated in the Kindle cross promotion campaigns that I
Yeah.
run 3 times a year. And
Yeah.
I've noticed there are authors in that who have books that are 8, 9, 10 years old. And I get the feedback from them saying, I'm now paying attention to a book that's like the back catalog book. Maybe it was their first book and they've got second and third
Yeah.
books now. And they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, the book's still evergreen. I wasn't talking about it. And then they bring it up and now everyone's talking about it and sales are happening and
Yeah.
introductions and referrals. And I
Yeah.
just, even successfully produced books
Yeah.
sometimes languish and we
Mhm.
forget to talk about them. So,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. You
Totally.
mentioned pricing. You just mentioned $100,000. How do people approach working with a ghostwriter? Because I imagine the fees are all over the place. The type of services, how much therapy they provide,
Yeah.
whether you bring your own tissues or not. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know. So,
Yeah. There's a
what's
huge
some
range.
questions to
Yep.
ask
Yep.
yourself if you're thinking about hiring a ghostwriter?
Yeah, I think one big question to ask is, well, have you ever collaborated on a piece of writing with anyone before? Do you even understand what that would look like? And that's a very important question to ask a ghostwriter if you're interviewing somebody. How does this process work? How will we go back and forth? How will you ensure that my voice is in the book? And different ghostwriters have different processes that they use for that. So that's a big question. Can you work with somebody else? How are you going to feel hearing your words coming out of someone else's fingers or out of someone else's mouth? But the other thing to consider is that yes, this is a big investment. So again, what's the business case? How are you going to get that money back? It's not. I think sometimes I'm often educating people about the ghostwriting process and what the price range is. It's probably something like $5,000 to $200,000 because there are celebrity ghostwriters and they get paid a premium for writing books. And if you get a good reputation as a ghostwriter, if you've written Prince Harry's memoir, for example, right, you're going to get a
Wait,
huge
he didn't
huge bump.
write it himself?
No, yeah.
News
Have you
break.
have you not read the New Yorker article from Prince Harry's ghostwriter? It's really fabulous
It's
because
amazing.
that's the other
Yeah.
thing. Like I extend full confidentiality to my clients, so no one has to know that I wrote your book unless you want to tell them about that. But if you write for celebrities, you could get it written into the contract that, oh, I'm going to talk about how I wrote your book, or whatever. They don't mind because they're celebrities, and like everyone knows I'm not writing my own book. But it's really interesting how much confidentiality matters and in what ways it matters to people. When you're writing a business book, this is your IP. You may worry that it doesn't look great to have someone else write your book. But I think that's really comes from a misconception that I'm actually giving people ideas. I wrote a book with a vascular surgeon. I know nothing about the heart. Like I couldn't have written that book by myself. It's ridiculous to think that, oh, she's not doing the work. She gave me she just handed me an outline and told me to go write her book. That's not the way that it works. It's very close. It's, they are entirely her ideas, and the beautiful thing I think is like, it's really a mind meld. She couldn't have written the book by herself because she doesn't have time to do writing, but I couldn't have written that book because I don't have the expertise and the know-how. So we come together and rewrite a better book than either one of us could have written by ourselves. And in the best world, that's the beauty of ghostwriting. That's how I
I
see it.
wonder about the process of getting the ideas out of the head. This was a
Mhm.
struggle for me for my first book. I'm now on book 4, and as I've said before publicly, I still don't really identify as a writer. Um,
Yeah.
it's just not my
Yeah.
first medium for
Mhm.
communicating. I'm much
Right.
better speaking my
Yeah.
ideas out loud,
Yeah.
even in a one-on-one conversation or in a group, whatever it might
Yeah.
be, in a podcast. And so I really had a hard time. I had to like trick myself into getting the ideas out of my head. And these were
Yeah.
ideas that I'd been speaking about for close to a
Sure.
decade at that point. It was nothing novel in my mind about anything I was trying to say.
Yeah.
I'd presented on the topic, I had outlines, I
Yeah.
had, talks that I had done. So I
Yeah.
had a lot of work to just get myself to not be staring at a blank page. And I figured it out, right? And it's gotten
Yeah.
easier over time. So I no
Yeah.
longer stress about the writing process. I like the marketing more, but I don't stress
Yeah.
about the writing process.
That's good.
Um, and I can see how even if I were to work with a ghostwriter myself back in this is 2017 when I was writing the book, and I had tried for like
Yeah.
years before that.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, how would a ghostwriter even do this for me? Like I
Right.
couldn't envision
Yeah.
how I was like, I want to plug my brain into someone else's brain and then just
Yeah.
download what I know in like a 15-minute
Yeah.
intervals and then let you
Mhm.
go play and then come back and it's done. So
Yep.
so can you
Yep.
demystify this process
Yeah.
a little bit? Like
Yeah.
how would you approach a content expert, someone who just is really, really knowledgeable, like subject matter
Mhm.
expert on
Mhm.
X, like
Mhm.
cardiovascular surgery, something you know
Right.
nothing about. What's
Yeah.
what's the starting conversation? And do you need to be interested? I guess on a personal note,
Mm.
do you have to care about the topic? Like, do you care about cardiovascular surgery? Like, is this something you were like, I was curious about that? Or does it not
Yeah.
matter to you? Like I always
Yeah.
think my editors should really get my content and care about my
Mm.
content, but I'm curious
Yeah.
for this, is there a different skill that's more important than like their interest?
Yeah, that's a great question. I It does help for me to have an interest in the topic because there are moments in every book project and every big project where, you know, there's a lull in the energy. Like, the energy drops a little bit and like somebody's got to keep that momentum going, right? That project going. So it helps if I'm like, oh, but this chapter is really fun. Let's work on this chapter, oh, what about this idea? I think this, and I can like say blah 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 blah, and they can say yes or no, but or yeah, kind of, and then we get a conversation going, and that can often like renew the energy around the project, and that can be fun. So it's really great when I am really invested in the project, but I almost always get invested at some point because it's about the client. It's about creating the best work for them and in their voice. And so for me, like the part that really engages my brain is like, how can I create the very best book for this person? And obviously, books vary in how the quality of the topic and the idea. So not, and I recognize not every book is going to be like a bestseller, Nobel Peace Prize winning book, and it's okay. Like that's not the point. The point is we're creating a book that meets these goals that they have, and how can we do it in the best way and in the time that we have. Like working within those parameters really is fun for me in my brain because that adds the challenge to getting it done. And so that's what I like to latch onto. But of course, if it's a great story and I want it to be out there and I recognize how important it is and how, it's such a unique idea, those are the most fun for me and help me getting going. But yeah, pulling ideas out of people is something that I've a skill that I've really worked on because I don't think that was my number one skill when I started. I was just like, give me the ideas. What's the problem? Just and you're right. Like not everybody can just sit there and like read what I've written and give me notes. And like not everyone's a great editor, and that can be a challenge. I have to find ways to get them to give me the feedback that I need. Some people are just like I don't know, it sounds good, you know, and I'm like, okay, but is this a word you would use? Like, are these names okay? How did I tell this story correctly? You know, because you're relaying it to me, usually speaking, and then I take it and put the words down. But I say, you know, really lean into your strengths. With you, Robbie, I just have you record yourself talking, and then I would pull that, you know, pull the ideas from that and turn them into the written words, or I would interview you. You know, if talking is your strength, awesome. Talk me through this. How would you, I often ask this question, you know, how would you talk about this with a client? You know, tell me, just have them tell me stories, just have them talk, rather than, because you're right, once you like move your brain into that like writing mode, it comes out differently, you know. And I want these books, most of the books I write are very conversational. You know, I really want them to sound like a conversation between the author and the reader. And so I'm always just like, put aside English 101. You're not writing a 5 paragraph essay here. Like, just talk to me like I'm your client. You know, how would you explain it to them? And that usually
Uh,
works.
First of all, you just handled it beautifully that I asked you 3 questions at once, and that was well done. You didn't even forget the question I started with. That was wonderful. Um, Gold star to Emily for that.
Thank you.
And, you know, I think part of what was in my head was that my writing history prior to that was for academia.
Yep.
And I have a master's in social work. So the most recent writing I had done, which had been like 15 years earlier, it wasn't recent, but it was writing papers. It was writing those kinds of academic, reports. And so I never enjoyed that. You know, it was very
Right.
stiff and it had to be a
Right.
certain way and everything has to be noted. And,
Yeah.
I once wrote a paper in high school where every paragraph I put a citation because I
Yes.
said, I know nothing about this topic. So there's nothing of mine in this paper. So
Yes.
I'm not going to
Right.
get called out on it. Like I'm going to put a
Right.
citation for every
Right.
single paragraph.
That's
It's
right.
like
You don't want to get caught for
I
plagiarism.
didn't
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
and so like nerve wracking.
Yeah.
My conclusion had
Yeah.
but no,
Totally. Totally.
because I'm like,
Yeah.
this is
Yep.
not my content. So
Yeah.
I think that was my barrier in my brain. And
Yeah.
everything you just said about how would you explain this to a client, or let's say your client was facing this, talk me through the
Yeah.
solution. That's the part that worked really well. I have since learned, and I want to get your feedback on AI. So I had
Mhm.
ChatGPT interview me, and
Yeah.
so this worked really well because of my own style. Like I actually can't just
Right.
do it on my own. Like I can't just sit there and journal my ideas out of my head, or just
Yeah.
record it even. Like I can't, it doesn't,
Yeah.
I need a prompt. And
Right.
so I was trying to write a new landing page and a new description for a program and all that collateral stuff.
Yep.
And so I said, give me 20 questions. I edited the questions and I said, now give them to me one at a time. And for an hour, I answered a question and it gave me an attaboy, like, oh, that's a very unique way of like seeing
Right.
that. Next question.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. That's very illuminating. Next question. And it was just like, oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next
Yes.
question. The
Yeah.
hour goes by. I'm like, whew, did it. And then all of a sudden I had this moment. I said, thank you very much. She said, sure, whatever you want. Let me know. Come back. And I was like, oh, wait. Now I need help writing the like, the
Yeah.
landing page and the description and then it said, "You also want this and this and this." And I was like, "Yes." And it was all my words. And I
Yeah.
loved
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
because it was not
Yeah.
pulling from the internet. It wasn't pulling from like random leadership manuals out there in the world. It
Right.
was giving me back my own phrasing. It
Mm.
was it was helping me refine. It was giving me
Yeah.
options.
Yeah.
And I had not thought to do that up to that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really changed my understanding of a thought partner in that way, but one
Mm.
that doesn't just capture transcripts, because even transcripts
Right.
can be a nightmare, as you well
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
really turn transcripts into something readable. And I feel like that's a lot of what a ghostwriter is doing. So now
Mhm.
I'm curious, like, how does AI and ghostwriting kind of meld together? Because they do not, in my mind, at all compare. But I also imagine that there's a way in which to get some of those concepts out of people's heads, and then the ghostwriter can better work with them. Like, what are your thoughts about now
Yeah.
this tool is out there in the world?
Yeah.
How do you include that, or do you include that?
Yes, I absolutely do. So this is brand new ground for me, but So this is what happened. I had a client, a prospect who I talked to in November. I said, "Great, I want to write your book." We really clicked right away. She really wanted to work with me. I gave her the price, which was 50K, and she said, "I can't afford that." And so I said, and I started talking to my friend who does AI stuff. And she's like, "Well, what if you develop a process working with her, tell her it's experimental, where you're using AI and you're going to use it. AI is going, the idea is that AI will cut the time that's needed and the work that you're doing. And so you'll be able to give it to her for half off." So that's basically what I pitched to her. I said, "Okay, 25K. We're going to use AI." She was all excited about it because she said she wanted to learn how to use AI for herself and her writing. So she was on board. So I was like, "Great." So this is a new process that I've been working through the last few months. We're almost done with her book now. And the way that I love to use AI, it helps a lot, like you're talking about, with idea generation. Great idea, have ChatGPT interview you. And now you have the basis for your book. Like now you have ideas that you can build on to write your book. I do not use it for drafting for wholesale. Like I don't just plug in some bullet points and say, "Okay, write the chapter." That doesn't work very well. But the other thing that I've discovered is you can actually train. I use Claude. Claude is my favorite AI tool for all of this, but you can train it to write better and better in your voice. And so I have a process for, I call it creating a tone file, AI tonifier. And it can, you can actually have it analyze pieces of your writing and notice parts about your tone that are, kind of give you like a style guide to yourself in a way. And then you can use that to, if something comes and it sounds too generic, you can say, "Okay, make this sound more like me," and then it goes to the tone file and it adjusts the language. It can get a little repetitive, so it's not perfect. You still have to watch because it will pick up on a phrase, turn a phrase that you use. Like I think I use "let's be honest" or "let's be real" a lot, and so it'll like put that everywhere, and you're like, but it's really helpful. It's amazing. I don't know that I'll ever write a book without AI. At this point, at least in some parts of the phases of what we're doing, ideation in particular, editing. I love it for, "Oh, this sentence is awkward, like fix that." Really good with that. I've even started developing some AI products because I see this as a way, I can't, not everyone wants to work with a ghostwriter, and I don't do book coaching. There are amazing book coaches out there, but I don't want to sit with you and help you write your book along the way and give you homework. And that doesn't sound like fun to me. So for these people, if you want to DIY your book, I'm developing AI tools around my writing process. Like, and in the tone file is the first one. Let's develop a tone file. And so I have an email course on that I'm just rolling out. It launches actually very soon. And then I'm thinking about developing new other things, around that. And it's really exciting. I think it's fun because, there's a lot of opportunity for AI to make your writing better. And I have a vested interest in seeing better books getting written, whether I write them or other people are writing them. I want to show them. And everyone's using AI to write their books. Like there's no doubt people are using it. So why not be involved and help them see how to do it?
I'm so glad I asked you.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I'd asked you this question a year ago, you may have a very different
Different
response.
answer. Yeah.
And that's what
Yep.
this work is like. It's ever evolving. And, I don't remember who originally said it, but it's not that we're going to lose jobs to AI. We're going to lose jobs to people who know how to use AI.
That's right.
And so it's good that you're staying current with it. When I was writing my third book, Breakout of Boredom, Low Tech Solutions for Highly Engaging Zoom Events, I was heads down. It was December of 22.
Okay.
And, I was trying to get to the finish line, writing this first draft and get it done. And I wrote like 35,000 words in January of 23. And the book came out. The advanced reader copy was handed to my team the end of February. So
Okay.
it was so much work. So I wasn't participating in this like zeitgeist moment of ChatGPT
Ah,
showing up, which is
yeah.
right in that moment.
Right.
And I only really noticed it. I mean, I knew it was happening like a vague kind of way.
Yeah.
Um, I went to publish the book, and all the categories I was choosing, because it's a book about Zoom, were computer related. And so suddenly I was in categories with like, I don't know, 500 really poorly crafted, quickly made chat prompts,
Oh,
AI chat GBT prompt books.
yeah.
Um, And it was sort of like, oh, where is this? Like what? Like it got flooded,
Yeah.
and it's interesting how much, you could do a crappy write a book in a weekend now, maybe in 2-hour course, or
Oh,
you
yeah.
could follow something like what you're describing, which is a much more thoughtful, like here's
Yeah.
how you leverage a tool to get a good result, and
Mhm.
and own it's your IP. And that's
Right.
how my fourth book ended now being written. It's much more been my Sage is my ChatGPT name. It has been my conversation partner. And I'm at the very final stages of this book, like literally about to hand it to the formatter. And I had this section that just felt clunky. And I
Yes.
was like, what is wrong with this section? I was
Yeah.
like, I dropped it in, and it created paragraphs into bullet points. Like
Yep.
it just streamlined it. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that is much easier to read. It has
Right.
subheadings. And I was
Right.
like, I think I was just so focused on content,
Totally.
but the readability was kind of it was a little
Yeah.
off.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it
It's
was
hard
like,
to pay
oh,
attention to all those things when
yeah. It
you're
was like,
writing.
oh,
Yeah.
here you go.
Mhm. Mhm.
But if I just upload the book, it won't fix it. Like it
Right.
doesn't work that
No.
way. You as a
No.
human have to say, I noticed this sentence is weird, or this
Yep.
paragraph doesn't flow right, or something's
Yeah.
off about the order of these 3 paragraphs. I'm not sure which order
Yep.
they should go in. Here's what I'm
Yep.
trying to do. And it says,
Right.
oh, well, depending on what you're trying to do, so
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
all of that. But I think
Mhm.
we need smart human beings like you to get a
That's right.
finished product. I want to know about this 4-month plan though, because this feels this feels very energetic. That are you writing one book at a time?
Yes, I
Okay,
generally
so
write one book at a time.
one
Sometimes they'll
book.
overlap. I like to get to a full draft in 8 weeks. So sometimes if I can get to a draft with one client, I can start another one and, that works okay. But yeah, I try to immerse myself really in the writing of the thing. And, I talk about how I do the discipline of writing. I'm spending 10 or 20 hours working on your book every week. And you're spending an hour with me talking about bits and pieces, and I'm doing the research and I'm pulling everything in, and and then you're like, this doesn't sound at all like me, and I'm like, okay, let's fix it. So yeah,
That's
it's so
amazing. Those
fun.
hours you
Yeah.
just described, like, tells you why we pay ghostwriters what we pay
Yep.
ghostwriters, right? Because,
Yep.
like, the reason you're hiring a ghostwriter is you don't have 10 or 20 hours a week.
Nope.
Yeah.
That's right. I talk to business owners all the time. They're like, well, if I could just take a sabbatical, I could get my book done. And I'm like, okay, good luck with that. you know.
We were talking in the beginning about how an author really needs to have a strategic business plan for why they're writing a book. What are
Mhm.
some early success metrics that you think an author should be paying attention to, and what are they usually wanting to pay attention to? Like, what do you hear them saying? Oh, I hope this book does X, and you're like, I mean,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
focus on so
Yeah.
what do you hear from authors, particularly those first time authors, and what do you,
Yeah.
as a person who's got some expertise in this publishing space, see
Yeah.
as more sustainable success?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, yeah, I get a lot of people coming to me saying, I want to traditionally publish, I want to find an agent. And, when you're writing a business book, I will tell people if you have an idea that I believe is a bestseller and should be traditionally published, I will tell you. But that's not as many business books. You're not writing a novel, you're not writing something that is for a general audience. You're writing for a pretty narrow niche. In fact, I encourage you to choose a pretty narrow niche for your book. It'll do better. But in most cases, agents aren't interested in publishing that kind of book. It's too narrow of an audience. They'll say that kind of a thing. So, at first I have to talk them through like whether to traditionally publish or self-published. Most of my clients self-publish. One big reason for that is it's much faster. You can take it to the publisher and it can be out in 6 months. If you go the traditional route, you're going to first find an agent, and the agent's going to shop it around, and then you're going to get to the publisher, and the publisher is going to be the publishing is going to be a longer process than self-publishing. So if you're trying to get an idea out and trying to generate leads for your business, or you're trying to, get speaking opportunities, then that's, it doesn't make as much sense to go
Just
that
want to
way.
clarify.
Yeah.
So self-published just in your mind, like you just described it as a sort of traditional model and self-published, but it sounds like self-published for you would also include working with a hybrid publisher,
Yeah.
someone you're paying a fee, and then they're handling like the process. It might mean you're project managing all the moving
Yep.
pieces, but it also could mean that you're hiring someone who has a team to handle all the moving pieces around editing, formatting, cover design, getting it up on whatever platform
That's
they're
right.
selling the book on. But it's just that
Exactly.
you have more control over the timing
Yeah.
of it, and the what the cover looks like and the format. You
Yeah.
have a lot of say about that.
Yes.
And you're not waiting 2 years for the book to finally be released.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Very helpful clarification. Yeah, you can self-publish it. You can do the whole thing yourself if you want to. You can design your own cover, if you
I
want
don't
to.
recommend it, but you can do it. Yes.
Right. I don't recommend it either. Find a designer, for certain parts of it. But yeah, you can also pay someone to manage the project basically for you, and you come in and say, yes, that cover, which is what I did. I used a hybrid publisher. I paid to have the book published. The other big reason to do self-publish or hybrid publishing is because you own the IP then to your book. Often with a traditional publisher, you sign away those rights. So if your book becomes a movie, you often don't get, you may not get paid for that because you've signed away your rights. So some people want that control. But the other, misconception or, question that people come to me with is, do I, oh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, they want to be a bestseller. They think, oh, this book's going to be a bestseller. When they have, a very tiny audience on LinkedIn, say, they have 500 followers or something, and they say, oh, my book's going to be a bestseller. And I tell them that to be a bestseller, you need to sell 25,000 copies. So what does that mean for your audience? It means, you've got to have at least 100,000 people in your audience to sell 25% will buy your book. And that's being generous, right? So you have to be realistic about audience size versus book sales. And for a business book, book sales aren't going to be your number one
Right.
moneymaker anyway.
So
So I try to steer
25,000
them. Yeah.
so 25,000 copies. What benchmark is that for? Is this like a New York Times? Is
Yeah.
this
Sorry. New York Times bestseller.
yeah.
Mhm.
And the piece that some people listening might be surprised to find out, and others are like, I knew it all along, is people buy their own books. Like that is not a pure system. People
Yes.
there are companies that will run around the country buying your book from different markets in order to meet the requirements for New York Times. So it's an expensive bestseller status if you have the means. And then there are other
Right.
people who are content creators, like Mercury Stardust, amazing trans handyman, was the first transgender woman to hit #1 on New York Times. And she did it by amassing the following and
Yes.
doing, I don't know, like a 55 city tour. I mean, in the
Mhm.
middle of the pandemic, she was running around like, when I say the middle, I was like 23. So, but it was still, it was a big deal to like
Yeah.
be so visibly on the road all the time.
That's
And
right.
so that's the work. Like if you aren't, and it costs, by the way, even that costs money.
Right.
It
It's
wasn't
not
like she
free.
didn't spend money.
Mhm.
She just spent money reaching people, not just
Yep.
buying books to put in
Yep.
her, garage or
Mhm.
something. So I think there's, yes, like we all hope that our book will reach the audience that we need to have it reach. But the vanity metric may not be where we want to focus our energy. It's more about I like that you're talking about the niche, but also getting the book into the hands of those people is a big piece
Yes.
of it.
Right. Yep.
So when you're talking about bestseller status, do people also bring up Amazon?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and of course, many book with Amazon's categories, you can be a bestseller in certain categories on Amazon. That's definitely something to go after as a
Yeah.
self-published author. As a business book author, that's really important. I know Robbie always talks about reviews. That's a great way to help you boost your rating on the bestseller list on Amazon. Those are huge, and it's it mainly because it just gives you more visibility and helps you
Yeah.
reach your
For
audience.
me, I
Yep.
focus on the discoverability. Like if someone's
Yep.
writing a keyword related to your topic, you'll show up higher on that search page if you have more reviews, better quality reviews, more recent reviews, and more verified reviews than other people who have that same keyword.
Mhm.
And so having reviews regularly coming in so important. As we
Mhm.
wrap up here, I'd love to hear your thoughts about being a part of the BizBook Pub Hub community, both as a hub partner, but also you're an author, you've been an active community member. So like, what's your thoughts been about how this hub's come together? Why is it important? What value have you seen in being a part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so happy to have a link and a resource that I can share with my clients when they want to know what's next, right? Okay, we've written the book. Now there's a lot more that happens after they work with me and they get to a full draft. They might need an editor, they might need someone to help them with book marketing, they might need formatting, all of these things that are in there. And so I say, great, go to the hub. Everything is there. I endorse all of these people. They're amazing. I've interacted with them. Robbie is amazing. He knows all the best people. So that's just the best endorsement I can give, and the best way that I can share with my clients what's next, because I want them to be successful, obviously.
I
Yeah.
love it. I always think that it sort of extends our Rolodex.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
like such an old-fashioned term, but it extends our sort of trusted referral network, and
Right.
and maybe fills in gaps that we didn't have someone to like do a certain thing, and now
Yeah.
we're like, oh, we definitely know someone who does that.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah,
cool. Thank you.
before I'd have to search my LinkedIn connections and be like, "Oh, I don't really know this person, but they do what you're looking at." It's, like, not helpful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's awesome.
Well, so as we wrap up here, I'd love to know how people can find you and follow your work, because I love what you're doing. I love your energy about it. I love that you're thinking strategically with your authors and even helping people decide not to write a book right now, maybe wait a little bit and
Yeah.
then come back and
Yeah.
do it. I think this is so smart. It's the kind of partner that I think entrepreneurs, specifically those writing a book to help them grow their business, need to have. So thank you for being part of the hub. And how can
Yeah.
people find you and follow your work?
Yeah, awesome. You can obviously find me on the hub. My website is the Pocket PhD. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me Emily Crookston. It's really simple, and you'll see me in my bright orange and yellow at the top. So,
Awesome.
yeah,
We're
thank
going to
you.
put all your links as well as a link to your hub profile will all be available at bizbookpubhub.com. We have new episodes that come out every Tuesday and Thursday, so you can always check out the show notes from any of those previous shows, panels, etc. And then you get to meet folks like Emily. Our hub partners are all listed there in the directory. An invitation to come to one of our free virtual networking events, and of course, the Kindle cross promotion campaigns that we host 3 times a year, and more. There's so much more, all available at bizbookpubhub.com. Emily, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Robbie.